After a track with 2 hills, only one came out on top. It was Jake's day at Oulton Park as BMW romped to the title challenge.
Hello and welcome back to the British Touring Car Podcast. You're with us once again, and following another weekend of racing, this time from Oulton Park up in Cheshire. Russ, how are you this week? Have you cooled down a bit?
Well, it's less hot than it was this time last week when we recorded
Yes.
the preview. It's still too hot for Britain and living in an insulated flat, but no, I'm okay. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Still suffering with a hay fever, unfortunately. My eyes feel really dry and scratchy, but I'll do my best not to rub them during this.
I'm enjoying the way your camera's mounted because it says your top just says I have nothing, which I quite like.
Yeah, I thought I'd use that irony this week.
I have nothing.
We'll get around to the predictions that we made in our next podcast, but you'll see that they didn't go quite as well as we all planned. But yeah, it was an okay weekend of racing, wasn't it?
It was better than Thruxton, which was always going to be the case, to be honest. I thought it was good. There was some good overtaking. The top 10 are always going to be pretty much the top 10, I think, and the top 3, 4, 5 drivers are always going to be the top 3, 4, 5 drivers more often than not. That is a bit of a problem which we'll cover during the summer on one of our many summer adventures we are looking into doing. But yeah, it was fine. It was fine. And actually, you can do it down where you like, but the gap going into the summer break for Sutton, who has won this 4 rounds ago, is only 6 points clear at the top, which is nothing in touring car terms. That's 2 places, effectively.
Yeah, it's been a good weekend for the championship, I think. Certainly
Agreed.
one that we needed. And I think you said in the preview that it could be a pivotal one, especially going into the summer break. But yeah, it's closing up nicely.
I also said, just because in the other prediction pod we'll get to, I got very little, that I didn't think Ash Sutton would clear up this weekend, and I was right.
No, he didn't. Yeah, we will get onto that into the prediction pod. But of course, here is your one-stop shop for all the race action. And we'll get on with qualifying on Saturday. So qualifying on Saturday then, another top 10 shootout. So a 25-minute session first of all to work out who are going to be the top 10 drivers through to that shootout. And it was pretty much as she goes, really. All the top drivers you kind of expect in there, with a few surprises. For me, I didn't expect Bobby Thompson to be as quick as he was, up there in 6th, and also Aaron Taylor-Smith in 8th, getting into the top 10 shootout.
Yeah, Taylor Swift in particular surprised me, as I didn't think that the Astros would be particularly quick this weekend. Thompson is very good. He's got a good setup on that car. He's driving very nicely in that car. I'm perhaps slightly surprised that he's in amongst it so often, but hey, that car, that seems to be the one car hard I've got to work properly, as it were, and the one car that is consistent, and then it all falls apart on the Sunday. But yeah, it's
not
Thompson.
Not through all his own fault this weekend, though.
No, agreed. I think Thompson is in that second set of drivers for me now, where you're looking at your Butchers, your Thompsons, etc. I think he's in that second set.
He's got very good one-lap pace, we've seen, and we know the Cupra can have very good one-lap pace. It just really, it still needs a little bit more on that race side. Yes, those two in that Auto Bright team have got better this season, but you also need the rub of the green and a bit of luck on a weekend as well.
I'd love to see Bobby in a race-winning car to see what he can do.
Yeah, so would I. Especially because his teammate was down in 15th, Dan Lloyd, and then the rest of the Cupras were 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and also 20th. And the other Vauxhall Astros were 16th and 17th. So those two really outperforming what the other drivers in the same car were doing.
I think also, just for on that, I'd like to. Ricky Collard is outperforming his multiple race winner.
Butcher.
Yeah, exactly. Teammate of Butcher, isn't he? He's been really impressive this season, Ricky Collard. Obviously not quite got a win or a podium to his name yet, following all the bits and pieces that have gone before. But I mean, look, he has really got to grips with that car, and I think he looks a lot more comfortable than Butcher does behind.
Yeah, both of them did manage to get into the top 10 shootout, along with Ash Sutton, who was miles faster than anyone else, over 3/10 in that session, from Tom Ingram, from Jake Hill. Josh Cook also managed to get in there in fifth. As we mentioned, Thompson, Butcher, Taylor Smith, and Dan Camish and Adam Morgan were also the ones to join them for the shootout. Interestingly, there were 19 drivers in this first session covered by a second, which suggests the field might be getting a little bit closer. And if you take Sutton out of the equation, I think it's closer to 22 drivers that are covered by a second. But going into the top 10 shootout, Sutton being the man to beat, having set some ominous pace so far this season, let alone this weekend, and he did it once again. All three sectors purple. No one was really going to beat him. Jake Hill managed to get the closest, but he was still over 2/10 of a second off. It's the single lap pace in that car, when he gets it right and doesn't go over track limits, is ridiculous.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And as you say, Ricky Collard performing really well. He managed to take third on the grid, which was an excellent effort from him. And he certainly looked fired up for it when it came to the short interviews afterwards with Louise.
I think it's slightly worrying that the top 10 was over a second separating them.
Yes.
You mentioned that it's got a bit closer in the first part of qualifying, but to have 10 cars, and okay, there's a good mix of cars in there, don't get me wrong, but to have 10 cars separated by over a second is a surprise.
Yeah, it is a little bit. I wonder whether at this point some of the drivers towards the bottom of the top 10 here had maybe used the best of their tyres. Whereas Ash Sutton has probably gone out, set a time, gone, yeah, that's fine, that'll get me through. And then he's got a brand new set of tyres still to go in this top 10 shootout. I think that's probably fairly crucial. During the main session, though, there were 19 times disallowed and there were still 10 minutes to go. It was certainly one for track limit issues, which we will just wait there. We will cover that in its own little pod across the summer, because it is a major talking point. Major talking point.
I don't want to talk about it here. Just briefly to talk about it here, having said I don't want to. Only three corners are being monitored, but not both parts of the corner. So some would be in the inside, some would be in the outside. The whole thing's an absolute mess. And as you say, we'll pick this up in a pod later in the summer break.
Yep. Will Powell managed to have an off during qualifying and brought out the only red flag of the session, consequently having his lap time deleted, as are the rules, which are something that probably need to be changed. Of note, going into the top 10 shootout, Sutton's worst qualifying of the season was fourth at this point, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any lower than that throughout the rest of the season. Hybrid making all the difference there.
He wants that foam foot.
He does. And off
it's the only thing he's not won.
It is, yeah. Off the back of that, it's the first time since 2015 that a driver has taken 3 consecutive poles, and that driver was
Matt Jackson.
It's only because I told you yesterday. Yeah, Matt Jackson, also in a Ford Focus.
Poetry in motion. That pretty much, I think, sums up the qualifying. Apart from Colin Turkington was then disqualified from qualifying for not being able to provide the ample fuel sample at the post-qualifying scrutineering.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of fuel that you have to declare after the session, and I think he went for he was almost last over the line, so I think he had an extra lap, which he did, which promoted him, I think, up to 4th at the time. It was 7th, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 7th.
And then obviously that was taken away from him, and he was put to the back of the grid.
I wonder if they were caught out by the red flag to how much fuel they put in the car potentially in the stoppage.
I don't think so, because I think they would have refueled the car between that and the top 10 shootout.
I'm not sure there'd necessarily be time.
Possibly.
Not sure.
We'll see.
Not sure.
But yeah, so the starting grid for Sunday would be Sutton from Hill from Collard, Bobby Thompson in an excellent 4th from Camish, Ingram slightly off the pace in 6th, 6/10 back, with Cook in 7th, Taylor Smith in 8th, Rory Butcher 9th, and then Dan Rowbottom would be promoted to 10th.
I think there's no way around it, but it's harsh on Rowbottom that he misses out on the top 10 chance of the shootout.
Yep.
Because Collins, but there's no way around it. It's just the way it is. Absolutely right. Should we go on to race 1?
Yes, definitely.
Right, so this weekend we had 2 tyres to run throughout the weekend. You had to run the hard and you had to run the option. Race 1, Moffat and Edwards gambled on the weather-staying drive throughout the weekend and opted to run the hard tyres, get the pain out of the way. They were the only 2 on the grid to do so. Off the line, Hill got a much better start than Sutton and went straight into the lead. Sutton would then put this pressure on for the first couple of laps before falling back. We can't seem to have any form of start procedure this year without it going wrong for someone. And this time round, it was Rory Butcher who got a 5-second penalty for for being out of position on the start.
Yep, not the only driver that get caught out by that this weekend either.
We then had some actual racing, which we had forgotten existed for Thruxton's weekend, between Hill and Sutton. A lot of door banging, a lot of hip and shoulder, a lot of hard fair racing, just about on the line of okay.
Yeah, Sutton knew he had to make a move early because once the BMW's got their tyres warmed up, front and rear, then they can normally hold back most of the grid, I would say, with that wide BMW. So Sutton knew that he had to attack early. It just didn't quite pay off.
Things weren't paying off for his teammate Osborne, who had to come into the pits of an issue, which, do you know what? He might be, if he doesn't win the Jack Sears, the best car not to win the Jack Sears.
I don't understand why his car isn't as reliable, first of all, and seems to have these problems. But then he doesn't seem to capitalise on when the car's good either.
Well, theory on your first part, I imagine he is 4th in line for everything.
Yeah.
Time, parts, etc., etc. And I think also he's up against 2 elite drivers, one very good driver, and that's always going to make things look difficult in comparison.
It is, but then you compare him against the other drivers in the Jack Sears.
Yeah.
He should be doing better.
Ingram pulled off a really nice move on Collard into Old Hall, clean and fair as you'd expect. Ricky flashed him as he went through. Was that a sign of give it back or fair play? That's good racing, because we know Ricky loves good racing. He loves the old touring cars. He loves being able to see good fast racing. So I assume it's just an appreciation post from Ricky on that one.
Yeah, I'm sure he appreciates every driver on the grid like that. No, it was an excellent move from Ingram. Something that we would come to see pretty much from Turkington for most of the day as well. He seemed to find his favourite place to overtake being Old Hall.
Talking to drivers who seem to have issues all season, Gamble had to pit with an issue. It's just not worked for him so far this year, which is a shame because he had a strong debut season and it's not really kicked on for him at Toyota, unfortunately. Colin starting from the back was on a really strong recovery drive. I will be eating a little bit of Colin Turkington humble pie on this pod, and let the praise be as loud as the disrespect. That is what we always say. And at a track which is narrow and difficult to overtake on, Colin did a fab job this weekend, to be fair to him, and really got his elbows out in this race and really forced himself into the points with some good, hard racing manoeuvres, which was good to see because we have criticised his lack of racecraft or lack of aggressive racing in the past.
It was almost like after qualifying, he was backed into a corner and surrounded, being put to the back of the grid. He knew with Hill, Ingram, Sutton, Camish all being in the top 6 or 7 that he needed to make this fight back. And in race 1, I don't want to say he made it look easy. He had to work for a couple of those positions, especially once he got sort of like around the top 15. He then had to work for the next 4 or 5 positions. But he overtook the people we expected him to overtake. He had a little bit of fortune with a couple of other drivers having mechanical issues, yes, but he made the moves where it was necessary and got his elbows out a bit more this weekend.
And it's not easy always to make a move, as Pearson would find out, of an ambitious but rubbish move outside the hairpin, which cost him... Oh, Sam, it was terrible. Ambitious but rubbish. Outside of the hairpin, cost him about 3 places. He got shuffled out onto the grass. I mean, yeah, hats off for trying it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think he's just missed his braking point. He's outbraked himself and he's running way too deep. which has ultimately cost him, as you say, a couple of positions.
Jelly was doing his customary, I must find a BMW and stick to it with Adam Morgan. And I'm surprised, although pleasantly surprised, that the WSR management seemed to be of the opinion, let them race. There was quite a bit of banging between the pair of them. You'd have a few hearts in mouths in the BMW garage, I'm sure, given that the last thing you want is to take each other off.
Yep.
And I think that, I know I said it last year about Hill and Turkington, but I do think there'll be a WSR coming together this year, the way they are currently being allowed to race.
I like it.
I'm not against it at all. I'm not against it at all. Another thing that was nice to see a bit further back was Nick Hamilton was racing really nicely. He was on the back of the group in front of him. So we've seen in the past he sometimes gets cut adrift of the cars in front. He was on the pace this weekend. He was on the in and around the group with Boutel and Edwards, which was good to see. So yeah, and Halstead in and amongst that too. So a good showing from Nick. So that's good to see. Butcher with his 5-second penalty then ran wide outside of Knickerbrook. I'm not sure that the ITV commentators have actually to this moment realised what actually happened.
No,
but he tumbled down the order.
They still think his time was being adjusted on the timing screen on the left hand side. But just sort of like as the camera panned round coming out of Nickelbrook, I was like, that's a Toyota off. Is that Collard? Knowing his luck at the moment.
Yeah.
But then I saw Butcher fall down the timing tower. I was like, that must have been him. And then he lost his 5 seconds on top of that. It's unfortunate, really, but it put him outside the points.
We then got our first piece of in-race judiciary with Adam Morgan, fairly clear push to pass now, and Taylor Smith at Old Hairpin. Right, the Hairpin, whatever it's called. The Hairpin.
Yeah.
Island Hairpin.
Yes. It was
Island Bend.
So obvious that he just let off the brakes, ran into the back of him, pushed him enough to be a car's width wider of the apex, and then slid up the inside.
Yeah, he would be given a free place grid penalty for race 2 following that incident, and it's not really surprising. We know push to pass is outlawed in touring cars. It has been for some time, and you won't see a more obvious one all season.
Although the commentators were thinking that Aaron Taylor-Smith was struggling at that point. He seemed to certainly be the cork in the bottle, and maybe struggling with his brakes.
Doesn't mean you can punt them up the arse, though.
No, it doesn't. But I'm just saying he may be having to brake earlier and caught him out. But yeah, I think it is Stonewall Morgan being in the wrong.
We then saw Turkington and Jelly nearly take each other out with Colin Turkington with an absolutely balls to the wall move around the outside. It was very good by Colin, and as I say, it was very aggressive and a style of Colin I've not seen for, I'll be honest, years, if I'm being frank.
Yeah.
But it was really good hard racing by Colin, and as I say, fair play. He had to come out swinging. The title, if he hadn't finished well in the points in this race, I think his championship title charge would have been dead here at Oulton Park.
Maybe he's been taking some tips from his son, who's just started grass track racing, mate.
Possibly,
just
or maybe seeing Hill's slightly more aggressive racing. But fair play to Colin, as I said, really good racing from him, and this was a really nice move. Albeit, I genuinely thought they were going to spin each other out, Hill and Neil style from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so did I.
We then saw the main incident of the race, if you like, which was Aaron Taylor-Smith fired off hard into the barrier following a bizarre coming together with Rowbottom. Rowbottom's gone up the inside of a corner onto the grass, potentially with a brake issue, and clipped Aaron Taylor-Smith on his way through. I think it's a mechanical problem for Rowbottom, which is why he's not been given a penalty post the race. I don't think you can blame Rowbottom for that. A lot of people on social media have tried to. All I will say is that he does get involved in a few scrapes, doesn't he?
He has, yes. But I think in this situation, he had a snap decision to make, whether you go cutting across the inside of the corner where you've got more space before you get to a barrier. Unfortunately, Aaron Taylor-Smith was the innocent party in that. But yeah, it really did look like his closing speed suggested a brake failure.
Yeah, and to be fair,
something that we've seen at that corner before with Matt Neal.
We have, and Paul O'Neill did say afterwards that there's not a driver on the grid that would take the other side and go left rather than right, or right rather than left, or very round it was. So, yeah, Aaron was quite annoyed at the time in the car, but you would be after such a big shunt. But I think once you realise the mechanical problem of it, then there's nothing that can be done.
No.
And that pretty much sums up race number 1. A comfortable win for Jake Hill. Further down the grid, Patterson received. You right?
Yes, sorry.
Further down the grid, thank you. Further down the grid, Patterson received a 3-second grid penalty for an incident involving Aidan Moffat. Not seen it. I assume it was a push to pass style move. Moffat was with corking the bottle with his really bad hard tyres. So, actually thinking about it, there was an incident where Patterson did push him into Old Island Bend, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a couple of incidents down at Island Bend and at Nickelbrook Chicane this weekend. People were getting a little bit boisterous before going into the summer break.
Well, to sum up race number 1 of the day, then Jake Hill took the win from Ash Sutton. Tom Ingram in third, so he was. Try that again. Tom Ingram in third, jumping from 6th to a podium place. Ricky Collard held on to 4th. Dan Camish a little bit under the radar in 5th. Josh Cook 6th. Bobby Thompson 7th. Adam Morgan 8th. Colin Turkton battled from 27th to 9th, which is a really good recovery drive. And Stephen Journey ran about the top 10. Dan Lloyd, Tom Chilton 11th and 12th. Mikey Doble in the points and Jack Sears winner for this round. Dexter Patterson 14th and Andrew Watson 15th, which means there are 3 Jack Sears in the points, which I think is quite cool.
Yeah. Helped a little bit, obviously, by Taylor Smith and Robot going out on the penultimate lap, but still battling around the bottom end of the points, which is kind of where we expect to see those Jack Sears drivers now.
Can I also just give a little shout out, a surprising shout out maybe, to Will Powell?
Yes, yeah, made some decent moves.
Yeah, from the back of the grid, finished 19th. Not bad. I know that there's 4 retirements behind him, but he's finished ahead of people who he's fighting, i.e. Halstead, Edwards, Hamilton. They are in his...
One thing I must say on that, however, is both, I think, Moffat and Edwards were on the hard tyre, which we saw, compared to the soft, was so much slower. They reckoned about 1.25 seconds.
That's fine, but Halstead didn't beat Edwards or Moffat.
I know.
So I think you've got to give Powell a little bit of credit, because he was in the group. He was with that group as well. He was. Lots of questions being asked about Will Powell at the moment, particularly because the repair bill at One Motorsport has got to be getting higher and higher and higher on his side of the garage. But
got enough money to pay for it, mate.
Well, again, give the credit where it's due. He's got to 19th. Yeah, not too bad at all. And Roy Butcher finished 16th with his 5-second penalty. I'm just trying to work out who got the fastest lap, because it's not actually bold on the website, so I don't know.
No, I'm not sure. I think it might have been Hill, but we will check.
Yeah, we'll say it was Hill. Should we go to race 2?
Yes, we shall. So starting off with race 2 then, as you said, Morgan had a 3-place group drop due to that push to pass in race 1. Cook would be starting his 250th race. Still thinking that he's in the championship hunt this season somehow. But yeah, he would be up for his 250th, which I'm surprised he's been in it for that long.
Yeah, he's been in a while, hasn't he? He started in the MG. Was that his first one? I can't remember. He's been in it a while. I do quite like the fact that he spent 1 season with Jason Plato and his whinging has gone up to brand new levels. I mean, on the grid, complaining about the car. There's always something missing from the car. That was Plato's sort of, just 1 year of Jason Plato, and suddenly he's become the absolute master in how to whine. So
in this race, once again, we had all but 2 cars on the soft tyre. Rowbottom and Osborne pretty much starting from the back. This race will be starting on the hard. Not expecting them to make too much progress, which they didn't, and that was kind of expected, but they wanted to get that pain out of the way. They might as well have done it because they were starting from the back anyway. Race gets off pretty even start. Jake Hill gets the jump once again. Ingram tries to make some look up the inside of Sutton, or running outside of Sutton, but nothing really happening there. And then the first instant is Cook and Thompson coming together, going down Cascades. Looks as if going into the left-hander at the bottom of the hill, should I say, that they've just had a coming together. Thompson's come off the worst because he's on the outside, pushed him through the gravel, and then he's also consequently broken the suspension as a result of that, which is a shame because it was looking like a promising weekend for him at that point, having had a good result in race 1, really good qualifying, and then just to be unceremoniously dumped out of that race.
You've used the word. Shame. It was a shame. Josh Cook was penalised by means of a 3-place grid penalty for race number 3. due to that. So obviously he was deemed to be at fault. I'm slightly surprised he got the penalty for it because it is a bit of first corner bunching, first lap incident.
I think from what I remember seeing, it looked a bit of a lunge.
Yeah, it's probably avoidable, but it's also the first lap.
As Martin Brundle would say, a
day late and a dollar
day
short.
late and a dollar short, yeah. I temporarily forgot that then.
The key to delivering a quote is to know the quote before you start delivering it. That tends to really work.
I have nothing to declare except my genius, mate.
You have nothing.
Yes. Edwards, unfortunately, was spun down at Nickelbrook by Powell. It was a bit of a coming together between Powell and Rowbottom. She got a little bit of a shove from behind, and then as Powell was trying to turn in, sort of like spun around the opposite way to the corner. Jelly penalised for a false start.
Just go back to the Powell Edwards thing. For me, that's a racing incident, and I think the marshals felt the same because nothing was given after the steward. Felt the same because nothing was given after the race. It's to me, it's an overtake that goes wrong. It happens.
Yeah, the fact that she also got pushed as well. I think if she hadn't been pushed and they turned in together, they would have probably both made the corner.
Pushed by Rowbottom.
Pushed by Rowbottom, yes.
Who, as I say, does seem to get involved.
He does. As I was saying, Jelly got a penalty for a false start. Looked like he was just creeping forward over his grid box, and cameras picked up on that. And already by lap 2, the top 3 of Hill, Sutton and Ingram were gapping the field, looking fairly ominous as well.
You said it at the end of race 1. Those 3 are miles ahead of everybody else.
They're a cut above.
They really are. Camish and Turkington are holding onto the coattails just. I think Colin more so than Camish, from being perfectly frank. But yeah, those 3 are, I think they're a cut above. And even to be fair, those 3, I think Ingram and Sutton are slightly ahead of Hill as well.
Yeah, this is obviously the best weekend that we've seen from Hill this year. But in the other weekends, he hasn't been there or thereabouts like Ingram has on the coattails of Sutton.
Just want to go back to the Edwards thing momentarily, actually, because looking at the penalties, Dan Rowbottom was verbally warned for an incident involving Jade Edwards. So obviously they deemed him at fault for that incident rather than Powell, just to make that.
Yeah. Yep, that's no worries at all, mate. However, Powell went off causing a safety car. We're no idea how, no idea where, because did we get a replay of it? Did we ever?
No. What's the point? Powell in the gravel trap is going to happen at some point of a weekend, so it's becoming normal now. Unfortunately, it's difficult to do filming and cut in between, etc., etc. I get that, but surely there must be a replay of, even if it's the end of the incident. It caused a safety car. We have plenty of time in that safety car period to work out. I don't want to see the start on Tom Chilton's car from 12th. I'm not interested. I want to see what happened. I want to see why we're behind a safety car. I know. I don't want to look at Aaron Taylor-Swift's helmet bobbing along.
We didn't even get a replay of the Cook and Turkington incident until the end of the race, did we?
Or indeed the Cook and Thompson one.
That one as well.
I'm
glad you're paying attention.
You have nothing.
I have nothing. Throughout the mid-pack, there was some good battling. Morgan, Chilton, Butcher, all trying to take the same piece of tarmac. Morgan being quite punchy this weekend at places. Going back to something that we've seen from him last year.
You say punchy, I say at times desperate, but let's call the whole thing a sham.
Turkington have managed to get up to 5th, passing Camish by lap 10, and then up to 4th by passing Collard on lap 11. He was certainly charging once again, and you could see the pace in that car this weekend visibly.
Ballsy move on Collard as well, because we know he likes to race hard. Sold him a dummy and did a bit of a lunge, licked the stamp and sent it, and very good move indeed.
Collard also lost out once again, pushed wide by Camish into turn 1. I think that was a 50-50 racing incident. Camish was by more than halfway down the inside, and Collard just didn't really give it up, and consequently lost three places because of it.
I agree with you, and Colin can't really complain to the stewards anymore because he likes hard racing. He likes to have contact. He grew up watching Plato and his dad and all that stuff, so he's kind of made a run for his own back with some of his comments a little bit.
Yeah, and then I started to question whether the tyres on Collard's Toyota had gone off because he seemed to really struggle after that. I don't know whether it was dirt on the tyres coming towards the
Bit of
end of the
damage.
race, or possibly, as you say, running over those X-curves and a little bit of damage. As he then had another coming together with Jelly at the Nickelbrook chicane. Jelly ended up spinning, going back down to 18th. What was a decent showing from Jelly then turned into a poor weekend, really. Cook managed to pass Camish into Old Hall on lap 15. Another almost textbook move going into Old Hall nowadays. You just roll off the brakes and roll through the corner down the inside of your opponent, and normally you'll get it done and get through. Ingram and Turkington had a little coming together at Lodge on lap 16. Ingram defended this really well for me. He parked his car on the apex. I don't know if he'd seen the moves that Turkington had been making into there, but he was dummying the driver in and then getting a cut back on the way out, and Ingram was just having none of it and just didn't accelerate as you would expect him to, and Turkington run into the back of him, causing not an insignificant amount of damage.
Yeah, if Ingram hadn't seen it, the team would have told him on the radio what Colin was doing through that corner. Now, Paul O'Neill described it as a little bit naughty in the immediate aftermath. Nothing wrong with me. Ingram hasn't brake tested Colin.
No.
He's simply taken the slower defensive line in, and Colin has tried an undercut. And the undercut doesn't work if the car's on the place you want to undercut through.
Yeah, he just hasn't accelerated
No.
to open up that gap on the inside that Turkington was looking to benefit from. But there's not much you can do from it.
No, as you say, it almost blew the lid of Colin's bonnet open.
Yes.
One of the pins has certainly gone. It was flapping a little bit, which meant Colin had to back off. As I say, for me, look, it was aggressive by both drivers. Nothing wrong with it, in my opinion, at all.
No. So Jake Hill would go on to take his first double win of his career from, again, Ash Sutton and Ingram, with Turkington, as you say, having to back off a little bit, but still finishing in fourth. Josh Cook finished fifth, from Camish in sixth, Morgan seventh, Lloyd up to eighth, which was a decent showing from him.
Mm-hmm.
Almost went unnoticed in that race. Collard down to ninth, along with Butcher. Chilton in 11th, followed by Watson, who won the Jack Sears for this round, followed by Doble, Patterson, and Moffat.
That's the first race 2 Jake Hill's won as well. Not just his first double win, his
yeah.
first race 2. It was quite sweet him not knowing what happens with the balls and how it all works. It reminded me of like sort of bring your kid to work day kind of thing. Bless him. It was very nice indeed. And actually, this is more about race 1. I should have done it there. It's really fascinating to see the impact Mark Blundell's having on Hill, particularly in interviews afterwards. You could see where Hill was getting a bit down on himself, and Blundell was saying, "He couldn't get past you because you're quicker, mate." I think he's going to do really good stuff for Hill.
Even with the good start that Hill had in race 1 and race 2, he was like, Ash probably didn't get as good a start as he could have done, which is why I got ahead. No, you just made a really good start, and the boost has been tweaked a little bit on the BMW'S recently. Yeah. So I think that might have had a little impact as well.
Yeah, agreed. But I think the Blundell influence can only be a good thing for Hill's development, and it's fascinating to see Blundell in that role. A role that both of us said that we never would have expected him going into it, but I think he's doing it really well.
Yeah, agree.
Right, should we do race number 3?
Yes, we shall.
Right, so what ball was pulled out, Sam? It was number 7, wasn't it?
It was number 7.
Right, it was, which would have put Adam Morgan on pole.
Well done. You were struggling there, weren't you?
Well, I was.
You celebrated that so much because he was your third race winner for this weekend, and you were expecting high things.
Yeah, I was. I also did mention to you, and I'll mention it here as well, is that it did feel a little bit unfair how the racing gods worked, given the amount of housery he had produced during race 1 and 2, and what he'd been involved in. That the racing gods then gave him a pole, but yeah. That's how the racing gods go.
I certainly think Gal's been at his work, seeing 3 BMWs up towards the front, and as we'll go on to see, winning races this weekend.
Well, the biggest question for race 3 was, would the rain come? We were promised heavy rain. It didn't arrive, which meant that all of the grid bar 4 cars were on on hard tyres.
There were spots of rain on the grid just as they started to pull away, and we thought, yes, we're in for a really good race, and then nothing ever happened of it, really.
Hamilton took the risk and pitted for wets. I don't blame him. You've got nothing to lose down that end of the grid, have you? You only got everything to gain. So it worked, Donington. So yeah. Lloyd had problems on the grid with his engine and had to pit at the end of the green flag lap, which was also engine related. He also came out on wets. Again, not a surprise. You've lost grid position.
Yeah.
It's worth having a little bit of a gamble. Good start by Morgan and Turkington. Turkington was able to get into second place off the line. And then we get into probably the main talking point of the weekend. Sutton not scoring points, caught in another start line incident, squeezed into the wall by Ingram-ish, then hit by Cook. Now, for me, he's not been squeezed by Ingram. Ingram has... There's no gap. There's a natural closure as Ingram comes across to the racing line, but he's not squeezing. The gap is shrinking steadily, not suddenly, and Ash keeps his foot in when he doesn't need to. That's my précis of what happens. Do you disagree or agree?
Yeah, the fact is he's nudged maybe the rear bumper of Ingram. He's nowhere near alongside. There's no reason that Ingram needs to stop closing that gap. It was a gap that was always going to get smaller, and it's almost a silly decision for him to keep going into that gap, knowing that something could happen.
It is silly. I just wonder, with the way the car's been and how well he feels he's racing it, whether he's just reverted a bit back to his old style, which is that go for everything because the car feels that way. I don't know whether he feels a little bit invincible or whether he feels it was Ingram, so he had to, because Ingram was his closest rival in the championship. Did he feel he had to, couldn't possibly afford to let Ingram get in front of him or get off down the road? I would be surprised this early if that was what was in his mind, given that we're only at the halfway mark of the season.
I think it probably does have more of a bearing that it was Ingram.
Yeah, I agree.
I also think that he might think that Ingram would give him more room over some other drivers, especially like Hill.
Yeah, but what more room can Ingram give? He's moving to the racing line. He's not moved across suddenly. It's the natural moving across to get into turn one. I think Sutton's been very silly personally in keeping his foot in. Didn't need to, and then he got collected by Cook as well into turn one.
Yeah, as you say, consequently nudged up against the wall. Felt like he'd probably broken something, and then when he braked for turn one, something definitely broke and took Cook by surprise. I don't think it was a case of Cook purposely running into the back of him. He slowed down significantly on the apex, and Cook was the next driver coming through, possibly a little bit unsighted as well.
This caused a safety car, and I don't like to have a go at the marshals for obvious reasons, but I think lessons need to be learned from this particular racing car across the board. Safety car across the board, because the boards came out so late, right at the end of the racing lap. But equally, you'd thought that they've all got the electronic dashboard, so it should have been on the dashboard saying safety car as well. The radios should have been saying safety car. TSL timing screen was showing a safety car. I think there's a lot to be... 6 weeks now between here and Croft. I think there needs to be, without trying to sound a bit too hyperbole, an inquiry to how this happened, because they're racing right to the line, which is not how it should work.
So as far as I'm aware, the timing tower that is used on the graphics on the Btcc coverage is different to the TSL timing, first of all. So the safety car graphic that came up on there may not necessarily have come up on TSL at the same time. Even if it hasn't come up on TSL at the same time, it may not necessarily come up on the onboards or necessarily got to the teams at the same point. Hence why the drivers did exactly what they were supposed to do. As long as the lights weren't on in the car, on the dash, they raced until they saw safety car boards.
Yeah, but why were the boards right on the start-finish line? We got around a whole lap. The incident was at turn one. It was fairly obvious we needed a safety car, and they were racing right. And then we had the ridiculous slamming on the brakes when the safety car came out, which could have caused a horrendous accident on the start-finish line.
No, I completely agree with you on that. It just seems as if those boards may not have gone out quick enough, or one marshal post to the next have not reacted, because with those you only react to the marshal board either to the left of you or to the right of you that you can see.
But with the I think also you might be right with the board with the dashboards in the car, but also did race control just forget to put the message out, because they're gonna, when they send the safety car out, presumably at that point they send a radio message around saying safety car. Did they just forget to put the radio message out?
No, because that radio message they would have all been on the same radio wavelength. So all post chiefs and safety car and start line marshals, fire marshals, they would all be on the same radio wavelength for when an instruction from race control comes.
Because as far as I can tell, it wasn't a late call for a safety car.
No, no.
So, and Kamish arguably lost 2 positions here because he had stopped, he had slowed down, and nobody else did. So that to me suggests that it was on in the car.
Possibly. We'll never really know unless we see some onboards.
I do think that this shouldn't just be swept under the carpet during this break. I do think that needs looking at, because we've seen it in other disciplines of the sport this year. I'm thinking particularly F2, where flags have just been ignored left, right, and centre. There's almost a horrendous accident in Monaco where flags weren't. I mean, the marshal should have been on the track anyway, but the flag was also being completely ignored. And we saw it in F1 this weekend with drivers not slowing down for the red flag. I just think that, you can't just sweep it under the carpet. Safety has to be paramount, and this has to be looked at to why did the events play out the way they did, because it could have been a really nasty accident.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be some sort of inquiry behind the scenes, and I'm sure a few of the teams will raise that as well, especially the ones that lose out from it.
Right, you can hear the thuds. That's me putting my soapbox away. We'll go back to the racing now. Moffat was on a soft charge as the rain started to fall a little bit more. Again, until it became wet. The soft tyre would potentially have even become even more into its own. However, he did sort of eventually hit a sort of natural dropping off point, but he did race through the field nicely, was able to get past a lot of people, which is always good to see. The gamble half paid off. Perhaps would have wanted to finish a little bit higher, but
I think he finished race 2 in 15th and made it up to 6th by the end of race 3, which is decent progression, but probably not that of a Turkington, Sutton, Ingram. You would probably expect those drivers to be up on the podium, maybe, depending who else is around.
Absolutely. The BMWs are once again in full battle mode at the front, with Colin with a really aggressive move on Adam Morgan. A fair move, I should point out, but a really aggressive, non-Colin Turkington-like style move. I mean, we've criticised him in the past for not risking the win when second will do, but blimey, Eki really wanted this one.
Yeah, he certainly did, and Jake Hill was there to take full advantage of it as well, following him straight through. And it looks after that Morgan didn't quite have the pace of those two either.
Yes, agreed. He dropped off a little bit behind. Aaron Taylor-Smith then completed his barbecue he'd had with Patterson all weekend. The beef, that's a beef joke. By spinning him, spinning him round. It was poor racing, in my opinion. It was so avoidable from Taylor-Smith. Just bashed into the back of him and spun Dexter around. Those two were battling all weekend.
They were. It was a really weird one and uncharacteristic as well.
Yeah, and then we saw Thompson have contact with Rowbottom, which broke Thompson's suspension, or Ray Tolink, I think, actually, and that ended his race. Just to follow up from that, Osborne and Thompson, they will be reviewed at Croft ahead of next race weekend. An incident between Osborne and Edwards will also be reviewed at Croft, and an incident involving Dexter, Patterson, and Aaron Taylor-Smith will be reviewed at Croft. I don't know why they wait until Croft within the 6 weeks, but I suppose they have to do it in the stewards' van rather than at Toka HQ.
They wanted to go home, didn't they? The stewards just wanted to go home.
It's a late one, isn't it? Because you can't start till 12. So that meant that Colin Turkington won the race from Jake Hill, Adam Morgan in third from Tom Ingram, which meant he had 2 podiums and a fourth. A really good weekend a pointsy weekend, you might say, for Ingram.
Definitely.
Camish, Moffat, Cook, Rowbottom, Collard, and Butcher rounding out the top 10. Gamble scoring points, which is crucial for myself, from Tom Chilton, who I think stayed 12th all weekend. Stephen Jelly 13th, Sam Osborne 14th and winner of the Jack Sears for that round. And 15th, Andrew Watson. Your mouse clicking is very loud indeed.
Is it? I do apologise. I was just bringing up our driver awards.
I see. Shout out to Jade Edwards, who was 16th, so close to getting points, and hopefully those points will come. I think she might have picked up fastest lap point, but again, it's not showing on the website. So while you do that, I'm just going to have a quick look at the standings to see if she has scored a point.
That's
Let's
fine.
see.
Just sort of like mentioning Jack Sears this weekend. Jack Sears' winner was Andrew Watson overall. Unfortunately, Doble fell away right at the end of race 3, which meant that he missed out on that. Doble taking a win, Watson taking a win, a second, and a third in Jack Sears. So he topped out in that this weekend in a championship that's hotting up.
It's really quite exciting, the Jack Sears this year, isn't it? It is really good indeed. Edwards didn't get fast as that, or it's not showing she's not got any points. There's only currently 3 drivers without points. Would you like to take a guess who they are?
Sorry, I've got a championship in front of me.
Oh, okay. Then.
One of those drivers, I'm surprised hasn't taken points though, and
that'd be Boutel.
That is Boutel.
Yeah, I'm surprised as well.
Unfortunately, Nick Halstead did take points, but he has had 2 unscheduled engine changes since then, which is why he sits on -4.
But yeah, just go back to Jack Sears. Dexter leads, if this is up to date, I think it is, by 6 points over Doble. Sorry, 8 points over Doble.
Yes, it is.
And 10 from Watson. Osborne is 4th, which I think is mind-boggling in the car he's in.
17 points off.
It's also really mental that Jack Boutel leads the people who have scored points in the Jack Sears. He's ahead of Hamilton and Halstead, who have both scored points.
Yep.
And they're quite a way off Pearson, who I think's dropped away a little bit in this battle. But I can't believe Osborne is 4th and Patterson in that Cupra is top. But you have to finish races, don't you? That's what we always say.
Yeah, you certainly do. So shall we get on to our awards for the weekend, and then we can sum it up quite quickly, I think.
Absolutely. Who was your driver of the day then, Sam?
My driver of the day has to be Hill. A shout out to Turkington. Fantastic drive through the field, but taking 2 wins, a second in qualifying and then a second in the final race, weekends don't get much better than that, in all honesty.
No, I agree. However, I'm not going for Hill because whilst he did very well, he had less work to do. Therefore, I'm going for Colin Turkington to go for the back of the grid to 9th, which meant he only effectively lost 2 places from where he would have qualified, and then takes a win at the end of the day as well. Back in the championship just about. But had a lot of work to do this weekend. Could have easily been the weekend where his charge officially died a death, but he recollected himself, got his head back in the right place and took a win. Did very well indeed. Did some nice moves, and as I say, it was a bit more punchy, which is good to see.
Very unlike Turkington weekend, kind of.
Absolutely.
Who is your villain of the weekend, mate?
I'm going for Sutton because you qualify pole, don't take a win. That's not a crime within itself. But race 3, really, this could be it always is a really tight championship. It's going to go down to the fine margins, and you just wonder at the end of the season if Ingram is on that top step at the end of the season. Will he look back and rue this mistake? And it is a mistake. And also, it's the second time he's been involved in a start line problem. Both times, I think he's been in the wrong.
Yeah, although the stewards didn't see it that way last time. But the less said about that, the better. My villain of the weekend, I'm going to change it up just to confuse you. I'm going for Aaron Taylor-Smith. Caught up in a few incidents. Considering the last weekend that he had out at Thruxton being one of his best in the Astra. This weekend was almost a real disappointment. Yes, couldn't do much about Rowbottom taking him out in the penultimate lap of the race 1, but he was the cork in the bottle and he was going backwards in that race. Something that we're not expecting to see from him. And I was certainly expecting a better performance considering what he did on Saturday. Yeah,
the stuff with Dex just doesn't look good.
No.
You'll accuse me of banging the Dex drum, some people, but no, it's avoidable. That's the question I always ask when we have these incidents. Is it avoidable through just being a bit more sensible? And almost certainly yes.
Yeah. Your good surprise of the weekend then, sir?
I've changed it to confuse you. I'm going Watson. I didn't see him winning the Jack. I didn't see him winning the Jack Sears this weekend. I had Doble to begin with, but because Watson's won the Jack Sears, it makes sense to go for Watson. To be fair, PMR, that's have surprised me because Aaron Taylor Smith's problems in the races aside, they actually did pretty well this weekend. All three drivers have scored points, which I didn't see coming into this weekend, if I'm perfectly honest with you.
Nope.
And Watson is quietly doing a really consistent job in that Jack Sears trophy, and that's ultimately what he's got to be aiming for, and it's quite good to see. So yeah, Watson.
Yeah.
Yourself?
BMW for me.
Okay.
As I said in the preview, I thought, yeah, Sutton's probably going to be quick. He's always quick. I thought he would take one of the wins once he got pole. And then when Hill got the better start, when we saw Turkington coming through the field like he did, I was like, oh, hold up a minute. Have BMW found a setup here? And then the fact that Morgan was there or thereabouts, able to keep pace, and Jelly, until he had his incident in race 2, was doing okay for Jelly standards. So yeah, BMW surprised me this weekend.
Okay, who surprised you in a bad way?
Unfortunately, I'm going for Jelly. A bit like last time out, where I went for Napa being a good surprise, or back at Snet, Napa being a good surprise and Hamish being the letdown. Jelly was the letdown because of how much pace the other BMWs had. He was holding his own in race 1, to be fair to him. Him and Morgan having a bit of a tussle and staying together. But yeah, he then obviously got caught up in the incident in race 2 and then didn't make much, if any, progress in race 3 in a car that we know can go through the pack.
Yep, that's fair enough. I've gone for Camish. He's just dropped off. He's just
A little. Yeah.
He's still he's scoring points in the top 6 fairly consistently, but he's not bothering the podium places. He's not bothering the pole places, and he's not bothering the win. And it's just all gone a bit meh for him. Say he's scoring points. That's really good, but he's not scoring points enough for a title challenge at this moment in time.
No. If you add it up across the weekends and the just chunks of points that he keeps missing out on in comparison to Sutton, in comparison to Ingram, Hill, Turkington, they all just seem to be picking up that couple more points each race. And over a couple of weekends, that really does start to add up.
Absolutely. I mean, realistically, he should be second in the championship, and Ingram's done a fantastic job in just not going away and making sure that he scores as many points as he can do. Even if he's not quite on Sutton's level, he's making sure he's in the podium paying places. I don't know how many podiums he's had offhand, Ingram, but he must be probably second most podiums of the year, I'm going to imagine.
His consistency this year has been really good, and that is pretty much the sole reason as to why he is still so close, despite taking only, one win?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right. Well, that sums up Oulton Park. That is now the summer break. We are going to bring in you several bits of content through the summer. We're going to be launching our 10 Minutes With series, so look out for those. We're very much looking forward to getting those under our belts and kicking those off. Sam, do you have any final thoughts about Oulton Park, or indeed about the season at this halfway stage?
One thing, first of all, to say on those podcasts, small podcasts that we're going to be doing, will be on YouTube only. So please do make sure that if you aren't subscribed already, that you go and subscribe over there, get the notification bell on, and you can hear us chat about various different things and issues that we've found across the season. And then we'll also be looking into other bits and pieces. Oulton Park, though, I was hoping for some rain, just really grasping for some rain towards the end of that race 3. I think I said to you just as the race started, just like maybe lap 5, lap 10, just right in the middle of the race, just to throw a bit of chaos into the mix. Always makes for a better weekend of racing from my point of view. Going into the mid-season break, the championship's tight. And I like how tight it is now compared to what it was before coming into this weekend, or even the weekend before that. And I'm thinking it's going to rumble quite nicely as we get towards the end of the season. As you say, Sutton top of the championship, 218 points, just 6 points ahead of Tom Ingram now. Helpful for my prediction this weekend. And then Jake Hill has really pulled himself back into it, having such a strong weekend. 192 points now. Turkington on 183, and Camish, just as you say, teetering on the edge of not possibly being involved in this championship fight, down on 160 points.
Well, that was quite comprehensive.
I know. Anything from you, sir?
I'll make mine very short and brief, shall I?
Yeah.
Sutton's won the championship already. Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
we've got a hell of a second half of the season to come, particularly as we're going to Croft next, which is a BMW country, and is the momentum just starting to shift? It's going to be a hell of a second half of the season because also, as well as Croft, you've got Knockhill, which is a BMW circuit. You've got Silverstone, which is fairly neutral, but probably just about favours the BMW.
And Ingram.
This ain't over yet. This is not over yet.
Certainly isn't. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the second half of the season kicks on. As you say, we'll be back with driver grades and our predictions later this week, and then we'll be getting into our 10 minutes with podcast directly on YouTube.
Bye.